If you're getting pulled over and your passenger is just like, I'm gonna run. Now, when I began driving, I witnessed a man named Rodney King being beaten by multiple officers of the Los Angeles Police Department back in the 1990s. And that footage was all I had to see to tell myself I don't want to end up like that. It wasn't about color or it was just I saw that and I just saw police beating a civilian, and yeah, that fear of that happening to me led me just to really pay attention to all the factors that could possibly lead me to that terrible, terrible nightmare to live through. And this is where fear can help you, or at least motivate you, to prepare yourself for the best chance of not ending up in that situation. So anytime I get pulled over, I throw on my, okay, this is respectful, to my elders, to my authorities, Charles character. And that's how I kind of just, if I was an actor preparing, for a scene or something, just that would be my motivation. And as silly as it sounds, it's just, I have the respect that I show everybody, but then I have the mode where it's just, I know I am the one who is putting in the effort to, show my respect. Whether I get the respect back, whatever. But hey, if just not, pissing off the police by showing them respect gives me a better chance of just not being stripped out of my car and attacked, then yes, I will do that. I've had many encounters with the police where I've had passengers with me, and not to say like it's like a racial thing, but it just, in my data set, just all my like black skin friends would always, like, if we drive and there was an officer in sight, I'd know, because all of a sudden they just go into that like respect mode like right away, and I'd be like, what's going on? There's a cop like 3 cars back. I'm just like, so what? Just cool. And I'm just like, all right. Then the time where like we got pulled over, there was only like one time where the cop like drove by, and I'm just sitting here like laughing, and like my buddy next to me, Mookie, was just, I was like, bro, you don't think that that's like suspicious? And then like I didn't think anything would happen, but yes, we did end up getting pulled over. And I'm just like, see, like he was just like freaking out, and I was like, just calm down, man. Just calm down. Let me show you how it's done, okay? Like, but the minute he said, I'm gonna run, I was like so upset. I was like, you run, and like I'm ratting you out. Like I'm telling it. And then he started like this battle. Like, you'd really just like narc on me like that? It's just like, yeah. Like, what would you expect me to do? Like, live up to some bro code that like you broke in the first place by just leaving me behind? Like, it was just the most ridiculous argument. And then the cop like comes knocking and he's just like doing his thing. But just I just, and I've had white friends say that same thing, and I'd say the same. I'm like, you run, I'm gonna tell them who you are, and they say that like, why would you tell them? It's like, what do you think I am? Like, granted, I was gifted with the beautiful gift of gab. You know, like I was blessed with the gift of gab. And I've been able to talk my way out of a lot of different situations with a lot of different figures. But never in my imagination can I even think of a way to explain that happening and, you know, just preserving your freedom and my freedom at the same time. And if I have to make a choice of either way, where do you guys stand on it? Like, if you're getting pulled over and your passenger is just like, I'm gonna run, like, what? You know? Like, so question one, I would love to hear your answers on that. Going back to that specific passenger who said, I'm gonna run. And I just told him, you do, and I'm gonna tell him who you are. Like, why are you gonna run? He said, because I got pot on me. And I said, yeah, so do I. Like, just be cool. Take that and just keep applying that, which is ridiculous in itself. But just that's how I just dealt with him. And like, I was just like, just watch how it's done. Like, and yeah, just, hello, officer. Like, here's my license, registration. I don't know exactly why you pulled me over. I don't know, like, is it because I'm driving with a black guy? Like, have you guys been smoking marijuana? Officer, my eyes always look like this, so I don't know what you're talking about. We were free to go. And I look at him, and he looked like he like crapped his pants or just witnessed like angels falling from the sky. He was just like, how did you do that? And I was just like, I didn't panic. Okay? I handled it in the present moment. Granted, at that time, I didn't mean to like play that race card. Like, that's where I was just like, wow. I didn't expose that part, but just my mind, just when he asked, like, have you guys been smoking marijuana? Just my immediate response was, my eyes always look like this. And that is just, I guess, really the time when I was like, oh, I guess like I do have a race card that works and plays. You know, clearly it probably won't work for him unless he says like, oh, I'm part Asian. But I was like, maybe that'll work. I don't know. And we were joking about it. Everything's cool. And I had completely forgotten he was the type of homie who was just gonna possibly bail on me. You know, like this is when I just started taking like a survey of all my like friends and their fealty, I guess, since I'm a huge fan of John Wick. This fealty, I pledge my fealty to you. And that's in the spectrum, in the timeline of my interactions with the police. That was just before I went from just misdemeanor, whatever, to felon. Like, it was a complete, like, 180. It was going from that confident moment and just being the most scared I had ever even, you know, I was always so scared of being put in or getting caught in that Rodney King event that I just completely lost sight of preparing or even trying to prevent this transition from, oh my gosh, it's not speeding tickets now. I just crashed my car. And here's the thing, like I am allergic to alcohol, so I've never been able to drink alcohol, which was great for my circle because I was always a designated driver. You know, as long as I was at the party, my friends knew they had a safe ride home. And up to college, like I just, you know, it just wasn't my thing. But then I took a trip with a buddy of mine, a rather foolish, immature trip, which I won't get into now, but it ended in a stop in Vegas where all the preventative, I told the waiter, like, I'm not old enough to drink. He's like, yeah, so you want some wine with your pasta? And my friend's like, yeah, just give us a bottle, you know? And I was just like, all right, well, whatever. He's like, come on, man, just celebrate spring break. And I took like a glass of wine. I was on a lot of other stuff. And yeah, I just got myself behind the wheel and I just like ended up falling asleep driving around Highway 15 and then woke up exiting Highway 15 onto Flamingo where, you know, I'm just like hungover. Like, I remember when closing my eyes, my last memory is just kind of like bumping along like those like medians and just kind of like, oh, and that like waking me up. But the time was like dusk. It was still dark. And when I came to, it was like bright. That's why I say dusk, because I can't imagine myself just driving around this circle. Just, but I can in that sense. But either way, that was the time frame I remember. When I came to the process, you know, the calculations I made, I woke up, looked at my friend who was passed out with the seat back, looked at the ahead of me, saw a red light, saw a stopped semi-truck at the red light, me rushing very quickly towards it because I'm going 40 miles an hour, and I slam on the brakes. I hear the squealing, and I just remember the impact when I got like thrown this way, looking at my friend and his body just, and he was still sleeping, going from, the flat position because the seat was completely back. And he had the seat belt strapped down. So the momentum threw his body up, which I saw him just kind of stop at the seatbelt and then get thrown back. Which mine, I took the impact of the airbag. And so, like, when I came to, it's like, did we hit something? And I was just like, yes, you need to wake up. And there was just a guy knocking on my window, like, you guys okay? And I was like, yeah, we're okay. He was just like, just chill, like, just chill, man. Like, police, ambulance are coming. And, like, it's like, oh, you call the police. But, like, he had to because, and this is where the irony of the whole thing, my parents hated, like, the whole Fast and Furious, like, the dropping of the cars and all that stuff. But when I got my brand new Toyota Celica for my graduation present, like, the first thing I did was drop that car. And if I hadn't, we both would have been killed because the impact would have been direct if it was at stock height. And yeah, that force right there would have just killed us. But because my car was lowered and the design of the car was already kind of aerodynamic to the point where it was just, just really sleek and stuff like that, the car just pretty much wedged itself, like it just, and that really took away a lot of the force that ended up killing us. It also ended up wedging us underneath the semi truck where the light turned green, and the driver, I didn't feel the impact because it was one of the long semi trucks where it was even connected to the vehicle that he was in. So yeah, he didn't feel it. And when the light turned green, he started driving, and you can imagine, started just dragging my car with him until the car that just witnessed this whole thing happen, thankfully, like, took the initiative to run down the driver and be like, yo, stop, like, you got people dragging, like, and then the police were called. So yeah, and after that, I found myself in a Las Vegas or Nevada prison with 3 felonies charged against me from the state of Nevada and the people of Nevada. Like, it's a very intimidating opponent to be, like, accused of anything, let alone 3 things that you were totally against anyway, like. So that was just a lesson that it can happen. Just because I don't drink doesn't mean I can't get a DUI. Like, don't believe that, Charles. There's other ways that they can get you if they want to get you. If they want to get you, they're going to get you. So I'm always prepared on how to prevent myself if they want to get me. And the best preparation was make myself somebody they don't want to get. But in that sense, I put myself in that position, so there's nobody to blame but me. I can't be like, there's no other, except for maybe him who forced me to drink, my buddy, who, when I woke up in, a holding cell alone without him, just amongst, like, these adults, I was like 19 at the time, and I'm like here with, like, adult, like, men from all various looking spheres, where it's like, he just gambled away his money. This guy, I don't know, looks like some dealer. Like, it was just I'm always just, like, always good at calculating, like, my situation. That was like a weird, like, moment where it was a lot for me to just take in. And that experience alone was just comical yet at the time so traumatic because I had not eaten, and they were like, "All right, dinner," and dinner was just like the bologna sandwich, a cookie, a juice drink on like the school tray, and I was just like, "This is dinner!" Like, and I look up and I look down, and hands are just grabbing at everything I just was given for dinner. And the last thing I could just cling on to was my juice box. I was like, my juice is mine. Like, jeez. I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. And they're like, right there. I was like, I gotta go number 2. And they're like, right there, bro. I'm like, you guys are just cool with this? Just in my head, I'm like, and I just, this 19-year-old kid who thought he was just so smart, just now finding himself alone in the most scary situation, just banging on the two-way glass, like, I'm not a criminal, like, please, like, don't treat me like a criminal. And just, I guess, like, banging on the glass and just breaking down, an officer opened the door, like, what's the problem? I was like, look, I understand, like, I messed up. I understand that. But I am just so scared and I just need to use the restroom with some privacy. And I was just hoping that I can have the decency of just not being treated as a criminal and being given just the decency of a human being who messed up, who should be allowed to just take a crap without anybody watching him and not ruin his pants because he won't demean himself to that. I didn't say the rest of that tale, but I'm not a criminal. Just please, I understand. This is who I am, but all the guys were just like, ah. And the officer's like, come on. And I was like, oh, thank you. And to my regret, the last thing was just like, and I just flipped them off. And the door closed, and I was just like, oh, why did I do that? Like, I hope I don't throw him back in that cell, And as we were walking, I walked by the cell that my buddy was in. He was way calmer. The cell was less packed as him. I get in there, and I'm just like, bro. I stop, and I'm just like, I need to get in that cell. And I was just like, I thought you needed to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, that's my buddy. Like, can I just talk to him? Like, thank you. Whatever. They threw me in that cell. And I was just like, what's going on? Sean, I'm so scared. He's like, dude, don't worry. My aunt's got this covered. She's going to get us out. I was just like, what? And she did have connections. She did get us out. But she didn't get me out of my situation. So, yeah, I mean, I've had friends who say, I'm going to run. And then I've had friends who say, it's all good. And in the end, whenever I tell them that, I know it's just really all good for really them. And as much as I can just mooch off of it, I guess. But yeah, when we got back to Colorado, he didn't face any charges. He denied. He said, yeah, this guy just drove me around, which I was really hurt. He didn't even claim to be. He just said that I was just like a guy he met and yeah, hung out with and was going to let stay with him back at his aunt's house. And on their way home, he ended up crashing. He had nothing to do with all the drugs that they found like in our car. So it's just, yeah, I've been at the verge of left behind, and then I was just completely left behind. So I've been on both ends. Has that ever like been a situation that you've found yourself in as well, where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't? You know, like, so what do you do? Does that make sense? Now, I know my father is going to be absolutely humiliated that I'm like sharing this story, but I hope that if anything, the message that I can share with you, neighbor, is that like without my parents being who they are, who they were, just working hard to be able to just handle tough obstacles like this with their kids, which I personally gave them more than my share. When I read the Declaration of Independence from July 4th, 1776, and I get to just the phrase, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, amongst those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's when like that part really hit home for me, because yeah, like if they weren't my parents, if they weren't my creator, then there's that possibility that I wouldn't have or could have made it out. It's just, I'm so grateful that my parents are my parents, and I'm sure they can probably not easily say that. But I hope that they can at least come to terms with being able to say that, rather than just be like, no, we regret being your parents. Because my father does ask me questions like, what? Like, he said stuff like, you're so lucky, like, I'm your father and you're not like your father. And I was like, that's a paradox I don't even want. But I guess I guess I can understand what the point is. I'm grateful, maybe I'm not showing it enough, but just kids in the neighborhood, just go hug your mom and dad and just say like, hey, thank you for, as Chris Rock said, like this light, this internet connection. Just thank you for everything that you've created for my life to be in accordance, with those inalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, it's always going to get rocky when we get to that pursuit of happiness part, but life and liberty is pretty clear cut, right? Except it's not, because, when we talk about slavery and just like supremacy, it's just, it begins at this phase, child and parent, like this is when pretty much like we can try to imagine what those founding fathers probably faced, signing and drafting up this document. Like, yes, I'm highly aware, Ben, that we are not. Tom, Just, John, continue writing, please. Just imagine being George Washington. And because I read an article that said, like, George Washington, these men were all deists, where they believe that there is some kind of supreme power behind everything, like, and it's not Christian or whatever. Like, I looked it up, maybe it's changed, but when I looked it up, it said the founding fathers were deists. They weren't Christians, they weren't Protestants, they were deists. So, like, yeah, I just put myself in these scenarios. And yeah, like, when my parents came to America, they raised me a lot closer to, like, a traditional, like, South Korean, like, parenting, like, couple would, as opposed to, like, the American Western, I guess, philosophy of just, like, yeah, your children, you're there to, be there for your children. It was kind of, at the time, just being a kid, I remember just being like, man, all my American friends just, like, I don't know. Their parents acknowledge that B's and, like, even C's are, like amazingly acceptable. And so I was like, why are you guys so strict about this? But again, whatever, it is what it is. And yeah, if I didn't have my father able to just back me up where my friend just left me hanging, where now, I have court dates scheduled in a state that has now, like, banned me, like, I was, like, not allowed in, like, the state of Nevada for or maybe that's just what I remember. I don't know. It's just, it was going through that experience, the whole due process, and watching people of all races, all colors, all convictions behave in the same situation and environment that I'm, preparing to behave and react to. I was shocked at just how many of them were just blatantly disrespectful to, not only directly to the judge, but just the whole institution of, the judicial system and all this stuff. Granted, it was all like, this is your 5th charge of prostitution, or possession of narcotic, blah blah blah, which I was like, oh, I have that. And I had a DUI, and I had intent to sell, and it was just like, oh, this guy has what I got. And it's like, how do you plead? And they didn't have a lawyer other than the public defender. But even then, a lot of them would just be like, just give me what you want to give me, judge. Like, they just didn't care. And the judge would be like, sentence, like. And then the next, a woman just like, this is your 3rd count of prostitution. Like, what's going on? And she's like, what do you want me to say? Hey, judge, like, I'm up, like. And it was just really sad to see that. And when I was going up, they asked me, how do you plead? I was like, guilty. And my lawyer was just like, Your Honor, I need to speak to my client. And he was like, why are Like, because I'm guilty, bro. Like, how? What do you mean? Not guilty? How am I not guilty of driving my car under the influence of alcohol and then having these controlled substances? And yeah, I'm like, maybe we could, but it's just like, what am I supposed to say? I just said I would tell it, like, he's like, what did you hire me for then? I'm like, I don't know. And then this is where he's just like, Your Honor, we plead not guilty. And I was just like, and the judge was like, do you agree with that? And I was like, yes, Your Honor, I apologize. This is my first time going through this, so forgive me. I was always very vocal about how I was feeling, which probably made me look a certain way or whatever, but it's just how I've always been, And it was comical because my lawyer, again, was a lawyer that my father had to find who specialized in, like drug cases and underage drinking, like stuff. Like, he was the best. Which was funny because he looked like this guy, Frank Azar, who's like a TV lawyer in my home neighborhood. Where, I mean, he's the strong arm, but I mean, I just looked at him and we both found that funny. That was one thing that we kind of were able to laugh at together. But it was just so shameful for me and just humiliating as a son to have like my father go through this, who was like a hard working, proud, successful, like, man, immigrant. Like, it's just, I'm definitely a test of your character, Dad, if anything, I'm sure he'll vouch for that. But again, without him in my corner my entire life, I would probably have a similar outlook on life as a lot of the neighbors I hear just saying how bad this system is just working against them or failing them. And it's just like, I hear you, but there's some things I hear where it's like not the system, it's just a byproduct. It's like a fake cage that system just ended up creating, that could possibly cage you or just like, like may get you into something. Either way, it's just without my father and my mother, but my father just in those legal situations, I would be a lot blacker than I was during that time. Probably still black now if I didn't have them as my support team as well. So it's just like, I just share this with you because this is the introduction towards like when I went from just like being treated as white to being now black. So after the sentencing, which I was embarrassed that this was how the system had worked, like my lawyer, never once did I testify on my own behalf. I had to listen again to a prosecutor just say like the most like foul things about like a generalized, it was just the people of the state of Nevada versus Charles Pang. Your Honor, we are just sick of these tourists just coming to our state thinking that they could just do whatever they want, get as, inebriated as they want, and just get off like scot free. We can't continue to let this happen, and that's why we're pushing for the I'm just like, like I'm the first one to come to your state with the well-known city of sin, and you're gonna talk to me like that? Like I was just like, who do you? I was like, I need to like stand up for myself. And the lawyer's like, just that's prosecutors. And the lawyer's just like, my client is not the typical tourist that the prosecutor is claiming him to be. He is a student at the University of Colorado studying architecture, which I was like, I don't want to be there. That's not a good representation of who I am. But in high school, he has no prior record. This was clearly just a young kid being drawn to the glitz and glam of our, our state, our identity, and that's why I ask that he be treated as his individual merits rather than the character that the prosecution is portraying him as. And, it was 3 visits. We had to fly to Vegas 3 times just to end with me watching, the judge like, is there, like the closing argument, like my lawyer went up there and was like, it looked like they were like just like, I'll see you at golf. Like, she's like, all right, well, Mr. Pang, and I got off with the 2 felonies were dropped. The only one that stuck was the DUI, which would have then been dropped down to a misdemeanor after I completed, all the community service, all the fines, and all the necessary, processes of being on probation, in the state of Colorado. But if I grew up in Colorado, I will be violating my, my stance on like, it was just, like that was the first cage where I was just like, So I understand like having that cage in front of you now whenever you see this. And that's why I just kind of put this in perspective, because that's when like you see this changes, when these cages become onions and just layer up on you. And so when you see those lights, you have such a thick, I guess like helmet that I guess just maybe, I don't know how to put it in like a metaphorical sense, but there's a difference. You act differently when you've been through different tiers of law. That's why when I hear people in the neighborhood like, I just got my like 2nd or even like 3rd DUI, I'm just like, what? Like, there's like Uber and stuff like that, right? Like, how are you still doing this? And it's always just I was only like at the bar, like right next to my house. And it's like, it doesn't matter. doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how far away you are from your house. If they catch you in your car with the keys in the ignition, then yeah, that's a DUI, which is a tip for anybody who is like drinking and just can't afford an Uber and it's just like, I'm gonna sleep it off. That's great, just sleep in your car. But make sure you do not put the keys in the ignition, sleep in the passenger seat so that when you wake up, because you're being questioned, because the police are like, what is this person sleeping in the car for? And you can't just really tell them like, hey, I'm trying to do the right thing and just like save some money. Again, if they want to get you, they'll get you. And usually the only way they can get you in that situation is your keys are in the ignition, which I've had friends that say, yeah, because it's like winter time, I didn't want to freeze. It's like, well, sorry, that's a DUI. And that was like a woman, you know, like I was shocked that they like got her on that or even just harped her on that. But yeah, I was like, shh. And so that would be just kind of my advice, you know, like that's still the right thing to do. Don't drive, just try to sleep. But again, sleep in the passenger side, sleep in the back seat. Don't do that, because that is kind of a hard, if you're blackout drunk, how do you know that you were sleeping the whole time? So just prove it to yourself that, yeah, you did the right thing. Like, I was nowhere near that steering wheel. I was as far away from that driver's seat that I could be in this state of mind, you know? All right, so that's a tip for just if they catch you. But now if you're driving and they catch you, look, this is up to you. This is where your light, depending on how much you've taken in, how well you can handle yourself, this is where your light starts like flickering and starts like, go this way, and you're just, and you just only see like dark blips, like a strobe, and you start behaving in a way where police pulling you over, think you're acting suspicious, and approach you with a I have my gun drawn attitude, rather than like, yeah, it's probably just gonna be like, I'm writing you a ticket, okay? So again, depending on how hammered you are, you probably won't be able to even like process what I'm trying to give you a tip as, which ultimately is just, you don't drink and drive. Like, that's just my ultimate, like, I have no sympathy for whatever punishment somebody who does something DUI, like, it's just like, what did you think? You know? So it's just, they dug themselves, they made their own grave. I have no sympathy for those people. And when I see neighbors who are getting shot and killed, who are causing this like focus on like color, when it's really just clearly they're Black lives. They're people who have a cage in front of them that puts them into fear mode whenever they interact with these people, that makes them do suspicious or causes them to act in resistance to what's going on, which is just, hey, if you're stop. It's just like, that's it, you know, like, you shouldn't have to tell yourself it's game over when they're like throwing you to the ground, you know, like, just give up. If you're in the car, you can try to just talk your way out of it. See if you can just, it's like poker. Can you beat the cards that they have against you with the hands that you have? Or are you just gonna like fold, or just like be like, I'm taking the pot, you know, like, for analogy's sake. So if you screwed up like that, just give up, Okay, now if you're in a position where you screwed up before, you're out, you're in a position where, yeah, you definitely screwed up again, and you're trying to see if you can get out of it. First thing is, you gotta calm down, okay, and make some critical calculations. If we are the unfortunate black souls who are now finding ourselves in this moment of a possible BLM uproar, which I hope is not something anyone wants to find themselves being a catalyst of, because of some stupid misunderstanding between pretty much body language, which, if you ask yourself the question, how is our police officers' minds trained to approach, assess, and act in this is like pretty much the majority of how every police officer will begin any kind of interaction with civilians, right? Is just probably pulling them over, aside from being called over. So in this scenario, we the civilians ask ourselves that question, and even kind of put our minds through that training so that, you know your enemy. And it's all perception. I always hate how whenever, I know I'm speeding, I got caught, and I get pulled over, and I'm just sitting there ready with my license and my insurance, because experience has shown me just any kind of movement that you make once they get behind you with the lights focused on you, that's where their calculations begin. So if they see, like, if you're getting pulled over at night drinking, and all they see is like a silhouette, like freaking out, like, just jump up, or just, like, that's an immediate calculation. Like, okay, this guy is definitely, saying something. And then, depending on how quickly you pull over, or how, or that's another calculation. And their minds end up being like computers, where it's just like, yes, this is how they're just mentally trained by our department to just quickly, get through this and make the right call. So one of the tenets I always live by is just minimal movements as possible. And if I have to make a movement that may be suspicious, it's always just out of the screen, off screen. It's like the TV screen. It's just all down here. You don't know what's going on down here. You just know what's going on up here, So it's just, like, don't. That's where, but maybe, maybe you're going for your information. Even when you stop and go for that information, just know that that visual on their TV screen, on their little screen that their eyes are projecting to them, is saying things that who really knows what they're saying, but they're saying something. So just, I always have my insurance right here. So it's just like I'm pulling down my visor and I just pull it up. And yeah, I just, turn off your car and have the window rolled down. Hopefully you're buckled up, but if you just look, this is when it's go time. This is what you prepared for, right? This is why you have insurance. This is why you have your license. And this is why we have our right to speech, our freedom of speech. Just say what you want to say, or don't say what you don't, it's just, you could use that right in so many ways. But just, we as civilians have to just know, okay, this is a test. This is like the American test of just, how do you get through this? So the Black experience is not the same as like somebody who is an immigrant here, who possibly is here illegally, or here in the the middle of getting their citizenship. It's just to lump the Latino experience into like the Black American experience is just not accurate, in my opinion, as Nicole Hannah-Jones attempted to do. Because when it comes to, I could get kicked out of the country rather than, it's a different tier of fear than the one she's portraying, that she's using to back up this curriculum. So again, my tip to anybody is just, if you see that, if you see them in your rear view, then this is test time, okay? Not panic time or, it is that. Just, this is the test. Like, how you handle these tests is just kind of how you grow as like an American, just you realize like, hey, if I'm not scared of them, they don't have to be scared of me. If I don't do anything that they might find fearful, then they shouldn't have to do anything fearful to me. Although that doesn't always work. And I'll share that in another video. But whenever we find ourselves in the right but treated as the wrong, and then like, yeah, clearly we're in the right, those are like the golden like times that like it shouldn't be used as like a weapon, but like a tool to be like, hey man, I can see whatever. I'm just glad it didn't end up worse. So that'll be in the next video. But again, if you want to survive any interaction where you're being pulled over like this and not end up on TV as a tragic victim of some tragedy with racial hate, but that's not what it is. So just to help me fix and do this, just know that if you're getting pulled over, it's not because you're a specific color or whatever. It's because this is the test, so hopefully this will help you prepare for just any time it's a pop quiz, but ultimately, if you are somebody who has been a black soul or is a black soul, you find yourself in this thing in the midst of everything that's going on, you just don't know what to do. Just breathe act as you would, not as you've seen everybody. Just act as you would, you know, just with integrity, and just, you know, you are innocent until proven guilty. So I always just, like, as a young adolescent and adult, it was like deny, deny, deny. So whenever the police said, do you know why I pulled you over, you know, there are times when I'm like, yes, I was speeding, and I used like the I didn't know it was 35, you know, but I always just let them tell me their reason, because I could always give a million reasons on what I'm doing that could be interpreted wrong. But you tell me, and let's go from there. But don't start jumping scenes and taking yourself out of this moment, because that's when, like, you start doing stuff that you don't know you're doing, that the rest of us in the outside world see. And yeah, we don't want to see it end up constantly the way it's been ending up, because, like I said, criminals who are in prisons are people too. Our answer to that is just lock them away is ridiculous, which is another one I will address. But hopefully this hour video will just help you guys know that as civilians, we all will encounter this test, but never should we go into this test fearing that they're out to, like, make us fail, unless we're dodging a warrant. Then that's a whole different story again, and a whole different video. So leave your comments, like, dislike, let me know how this makes you feel. And yeah, I hope to see you on the next beautiful day in the neighborhood.